Jake Paul is always making headlines, but since his fight with Mike Tyson nearly half a year ago, there's been no official word on what's next for the YouTube sensation turned boxer. Sure, there's been talk about potential matchups with Canelo Alvarez, Gervonta Tank Davis, and Anthony Joshua, but how serious is any of this? Well, I reckon Jake Paul might be facing some major hurdles in finding his next opponent, and he could be heading down a path none of us saw coming. But before we dive into that, let me introduce myself. I'm a boxing analyst who makes videos to keep you in the loop. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll always keep you informed. The Tyson effect. Now, love it or hate it, the Paul versus Tyson fight was one of the biggest boxing events of 2024, and it's likely to go down as one of the most significant of the decade. It was a massive spectacle and undoubtedly the biggest fight of Jake's career. Thanks to Tyson's name, this bout propelled Jake to a whole new level of stardom. Jake was already well known to YouTube fans and most of the boxing world, but sharing the ring with Tyson solidified his status among generations who otherwise wouldn't have paid him any attention. It's pretty impressive, considering his loss to Tommy Fury seemed to derail his hype train. But since then, he's rebuilt his brand and scheduled fights that have made his name arguably bigger than ever. Recent fights recap. Before we look ahead, let's take a quick look back at Jake's recent fights. In July 2024, he faced off against Mike Perry and secured a dominant TKO victory in the 6th round. He showed some improvements in his offensive game, particularly with his jab and combinations. However, there were still some concerns about his defense, as Perry managed to clip him with a few wide hooks. Then, in November 2024, Jake took on the legendary Mike Tyson in a highly controversial bout streamed on Netflix. Despite the massive age difference and concerns over Tyson's health, the fight went the full 8 rounds, with Jake winning by unanimous decision. While this further elevated his stardom, it also drew criticism for being more of a spectacle than a competitive match. The pursuit of a mega fight. I've been a vocal critic of Jake Paul in the past. Frankly, I thought the Tyson fight was a disgrace. But credit where it's due, by carefully choosing his opponents, he's become one of the biggest names in combat sports, if not sports as a whole. We can't ignore him. If I had told you 12 months ago that Jake and Canelo would fight, you probably would have laughed at me. But it almost became a reality. In boxing, money talks, and if fighters are offered close to 9 figures for an easy night's work, they're going to take it. That's why we nearly saw Paul versus Canelo. Rumor has it the only reason it didn't happen was because the Salizes threatened to pull Canelo's 3-fight deal, which would have cost them a fortune just for him to fight William Skull. They didn't want to be overshadowed by the spectacle of Jake versus Canelo. So, Canelo was off the table, at least for now. So, where does Jake turn next? If you can't get boxing's biggest name, you go for arguably the second biggest, Gervonta Tank Davis. When I saw Paul at the Davis versus Garcia stream, I knew he was there for business. It would have been Mayweather versus Logan 2.0, pitting 2 enemies against each other for one of the biggest spectacles in the sport. But Tank's draw against Garcia put that fight on hold. Tank's aura took a hit, and he was exposed as more human than most of us thought. Jake Paul facing a Tank coming off a draw isn't the best promotion, especially with the massive weight difference. So it seems that deal fell through, and Tank is likely to rematch Garcia in June or July. The latest on potential opponents. With 2 of the biggest names out of reach, Jake recently called out Anthony Joshua for a fight rumored to take place in 2026. This seems the most ridiculous yet. Let's be honest, if Jake took a punch from Joshua, he probably wouldn't get back up. The thought of Jake fighting a true heavyweight is pretty hilarious. I can't imagine him at that weight faring much better than Huanu would. It's almost a death wish. There's also been some talk about a rematch with Tommy Fury, the only man to beat Jake so far. But it seems like that ship has sailed, with Jake dismissing the idea recently. Conor McGregor's name has also been thrown around, but nothing concrete has materialized. The bridgerweight route. If Jake can't land a big name, or if he fights one and loses, I think he'll eventually end up fighting for a bridgerweight world title. He's already hovering around that weight, and most fighters in this newly created division are subpar. Tyson Pedro, a former UFC fighter, beat a high-ranked bridgerweight in his boxing debut. The competition isn't great, and there are no big names in the division. Any sanctioning body would jump at the chance to collect fees by letting Jake Paul fight for a belt, whether against Chavez Jr. or the aforementioned Tyson Pedro. Paul wants to win a world title to silence everyone. even if it's kind of BS like most things in his career, but he would still technically be a world champion, and the sanctioning bodies seem keen on the idea. The KSI question. Let's be real. The debate about him and KSI is irrelevant now. Jake is levels above KSI in terms of opportunities. KSI's main goal is to fight Jake, while Jake has some of the sport's biggest names willing to face him. KSI has to pray that Turkey sets him up with something good, or he'll be stuck fighting Dana's and other bridgerweights. For Jake, a fight with KSI is an absolute last resort if everything else falls through. But for KSI, it's the best fight he could hope for. As much as I'd like to see it, I'd be surprised if it ever happens. The road ahead. Jake's biggest challenge now is securing a major name for his next fight. The goal is to create a spectacle on par with the Tyson bout, which is a tall order. To keep his Netflix deal, he has to fight someone big. Only time will tell who that will be. But I want to hear from you. Who do you think Jake Paul should fight next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, fellas. I'll catch you in the next one.